And good afternoon to everyone. It is Wednesday, the 21st of July, and I'll be coming home in just a short while. But right now, I'm in the highlands of just outside of Denver, Centennial, Colorado, visiting my brother. And for this Wednesday, I thought I would just take a little time to share a few more words with you. You've heard certainly plenty of them over time. And as I'm sitting here on the news, on the newspaper, listening to people, the number one topic still in the country, as I mentioned in my letter on this past Sunday or this coming Sunday, the most important topics of discussion seem to be the coronavirus and the civil unrest that it seems to be plaguing our country. But corona still seems to be grabbing the attention of so many. It's a frightening and troubling disease for hundreds of millions of people throughout the world, let alone in our own country. You know, we're constantly reminded each day of the statistics of those who have caught the disease and those who have died from it. What a terrible tragedy and a terrible sickness that seems to plague us. And yet we're tempted to fall into the same problems that I've been speaking about since the very beginning of this sickness, that we cannot afford to fall into fear and live our lives in anxiety, you know. And so I want to offer once again the same constant advice that we hear, not only in the gospel again this week, but throughout these last gospels that we've been having for these last several weeks. Trust in God. Trust in his words and his promises to us. Resist panic. Resist panic. I have to tell you, as I said, that panic and fear is not from God. I think the Jesuits have a spirituality that says that in the interior there's two forces that draw us to God and forces that draw us away from God. And what draws us away from God is one of those things is fear and panic. Fear is something that is not of God. Trust and hope and calmness is. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned about what's going on around us, that we shouldn't be concerned about the terrible sickness that plagues us. We certainly should be concerned. We should listen to the advice of the medical experts and the healthcare professionals. We should be listening to them and following their directives as best we can. But it doesn't mean that we should be living in fear or living our lives in a state of constant panic. Trust that God is with us. Trust that God has our back. Trust that God is answering us. He not only hears our prayers, but he answers them as well. He not only hears us, but he's with us. And how much do we believe this? This is a time to put our faith and our trust in that. I think I was reading, and I'm just going to read this one statement again. It's from St. Ignatius. God's Spirit stirs up courage, strength, consolation, inspirations, and tranquility. Whew. Certainly, that's what faith in God stirs up in us. It doesn't stir up in us fear. Remember the apostles on the lake of Tiberias there, where the storm comes up, and they start to panic, and Jesus tells them, "Hey, what are you worried? I'm with you. I'm here. What are you afraid of? Are you still afraid, even though I'm with you?" A lesson he was trying to teach his apostles, and a lesson he's trying to teach us even yet today. And another item, I read a story, and it was a story that I had heard or read about. I didn't hear it. I read about it, actually. And it was a story about an elderly Chinese gentleman that was riding the subway in New York. He got on the subway, and as the subway had reached a stop and people were getting off, people were throwing slurs at him, about him and his country, from where this virus came. Don't choose scapegoats. Don't fall into the idea, resist the idea of firing at a scapegoat, firing at either the country of China. It's something that happened. And could it have stopped? Could we have done better? Perhaps. Could the country have done better? Perhaps. But is it the fault of this elderly Chinese gentleman on the train? Why do we heap hatred and vitriol on him? Why would we do that? Our faith calls us not to choose scapegoats. Jesus tells us that sickness and illness is not a sin. It's not a curse by God. It's not a punishment of God. It's just part of the human condition. I've read that in 2030, the world will be filled with 30 billion people. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's just something I've read. And they said with the increase of people will become an increase of viruses as well, an increase of other sicknesses that will come as a result of the closeness and the number of people that inhabit our world. My prayer for us as we continue to deal with this. The president spoke just yesterday about how there's still bad days yet to come, and maybe the worst has not even happened yet. And so be prepared for it. Do our part. Be prudent. Be careful. Be concerned, but don't be fearful. There's a difference between living our lives in fear and anger and vitriol, And one of the ways in which we can do this is to care for the sick, to make sure that we pray often, and to know that our prayers will be heard and answered. Don't close our hearts to the poor. Even the Pope has been challenging us. Don't close your hearts to the poor, to the homeless, to the migrants, to the refugees, to those who need, to everyone in need. What are we doing as a people of faith for that? We know that COVID has closed down many things, but what it hasn't closed down, and it will never close down, hopefully, is love. Our call to love God and to love one another, to love God and to love our neighbor, to love each other. That's what our faith calls us to. In what way, in what creative ways, with all the time now that we have in our closed down communities, how are we witnessing to this love of God and our love of neighbor? Here in our parish, we have outreach. Are we storing up things to give to outreach? Are we looking for ways maybe to spend, when we can, time to give to the poor, to the homeless, to those in need, all of those in need, not just to some, but whenever a need comes, are we sensitive enough to think of them who have not, who don't have a home to hunker down into, who don't have 3 meals a day and snacks in between, who don't have the closeness of family, of support of family, who are living alone and abandoned? How many of us could take the time to call on the phone some of our own single and elderly and alone parishioners, just to give them a good word? It's a possibility. It's something. What are we doing to think of things we can do to witness and to practice this faith that we say we profess? Trust that God is with you. And that's all I'm asking you to do once again. Trust that God is with you and believe that he hears your prayers. And as you do that, trust that I'm praying for you as well. And trust in my prayers for you. And that we're going to continue to get through this together. Okay? No matter what you do, no matter how separate you are, we are in this together. We are brothers and sisters. We are a faith family called to journey, this rough boat ride in the rough waters of this sickness calls us to. And the rough sickness that invades our minds and our hearts as well, calling us to hate others because of differences. Refuse to be a part of that. Okay. We will get through this together and with God's help. God bless you all, and know that I'm thinking of you, praying for you, and hopefully you're doing the same for me. Have a wonderful week.